Have you ever lifted weights or engaged in intensive activities when you were young? Did you ever think that these exercises might have affected your growth? To answer this, we'll explore whether weight-bearing exercise affects growth in children. Before we get into deep analysis, let's define what growth during childhood means. According to Balasamdaram, growth is defined as an increase in the size of the human body and organs, which are influenced by nutritional, genetic, and environmental factors. We know that growth occurs throughout childhood and peaks at puberty. The major changes we can observe during development are bone growth and muscle growth. Bone formation, also called osteogenesis, occurs by two mechanisms: intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification. Intramembranous ossification involves the formation of flat bones, and endochondral ossification involves the development of long bones, like the femur. Let's focus on endochondral ossification as it influences long bone development and directly relates to phenotypic changes like height, which is what we mainly observe during growth in children. Before birth, chondrocytes, which are cells that make cartilage, form a cartilage framework for bone formation. Then osteoblasts, which are cells that make bone, replace cartilage with bone at the primary ossification center. The bone continues to ossify from the primary ossification center towards the ends of the bone. At the same time, chondrocytes remain active in the epiphysis, forming more cartilage. Then secondary ossification center appears in the epiphysis after birth, where cartilage is replaced by bone except in the region called the epiphyseal plate or the growth plate. Until adulthood, bone elongation continues at the growth plates. Growth is then complete when the growth plates are sealed after full maturity.
During puberty, adolescents can begin to gain muscle mass from the dramatic increase in hormones. Daly et al. States that muscle mass is linearly correlated with bone mass, therefore, muscle gain may influence optimal bone development at puberty. According to Hong and Kim, exercising, or mechanical loading, causes skeletal muscle contraction to exert force and stress on the site of muscle-bone attachment. This can stimulate bone cells such as osteocytes, osteoblasts, and osteoclast activity for bone remodeling and growth. As a result, bone can be strengthened and its density and cross-sectional area can be increased in response to mechanical loading. Hong and Kim also reported that bones are most sensitive to mechanical stimulation from the pre-pubertal stage to early adulthood. However, bone stimulation by muscle contraction does not solely determine the outcome of bone growth, as nutrition and sleep are also significant. Optimal strengthening and development of bones also require dynamic mechanical loading with high intensity and repetition. As reported by Daly et al., the active site of muscle on the bone will elicit a greater response to mechanical loading, and therefore growth may occur predominantly within that stimulated region. A great example is that your dominant limb may be larger than your non-dominant limb, as your dominant limb is more actively used and unilaterally stimulated. You may see slight differences in the arm and forearm of tennis players. Maybe you might have some differences too. Try and see if you have any of these asymmetries on yourself. Muscle growth by mechanical loading in children undergoing puberty is important for bone development and may help delay or prevent bone conditions like osteoporosis at later stages of life.
Now that we have covered bone and muscle growth, let's look into some weight-bearing exercises. Depending on the type of weight-bearing exercise, the level of load exerted on the developing body can vary. According to NIH, weight-bearing exercise is any physical activity that forces the body to work against gravity, and it can be classified as low-impact or high-impact exercise. Low-impact exercises such as walking and Tai Chi are activities with low intensity, and it does not exert high bone muscle stimulation for growth. In comparison, high-impact exercises like running, jumping, weightlifting, and sports activities can elicit high mechanical loads on the developing bones and muscles. Hong and Kim reported that intensity rather than duration of weight-bearing exercises could influence peak bone mineral density. However, extreme cases of overactivity may cause deleterious outcomes in growth. As reported by Mertz et al., Participating in high-impact weight-bearing exercises can increase the likelihood of fractures, and repetitive trauma to the epiphyseal plates may result in premature sealing and thus halting growth. So weight-bearing exercise does affect growth in children by the mechanical stimulation of muscles and bones. However, it depends on the level of intensity and repetition. Weight-bearing exercise also doesn't solely determine growth, as previously mentioned. Genetic, nutritional, and hormonal factors also play a major role. Other factors can also be considered, like gender, race, and certain health conditions.
The effect of weight-bearing exercise on growth in children can vary based on gender, race, and certain conditions like obesity. Interestingly, girls start puberty at the age of 12 and boys begin at the age of 14. Although puberty starts at a much earlier age in girls, they only have 3 years of rapid development, as puberty stops at about the age of 15. In contrast, boys experience longer pubertal growth of approximately 4 years, which allows them to have greater peak bone mass than girls. There are also differences in bone mineral density among different races. On average, people of African descent have the highest bone mineral density, followed by people of Caucasian descent, and people of Asian descent have the lowest bone mineral density. Currently, there is no proper explanation for these differences. However, we know that vitamin D and calcium intake play an essential role in bone development. Therefore, ethnographic differences in diet across the races may explain the differences in bone mineral density. We also know that childhood obesity is associated with adverse growth outcomes. Although fat mass does not affect bone mass accumulation, children with obesity may refrain from physical activities which may affect their growth. Research shows that inactive children have a 10 to 20% lower peak bone mineral density compared to active children. Furthermore, obese children experience worse postural stability compared to normal weighted children, and poor postural stability has been shown to increase the risk of fractures. Also, because obese children weigh more than normal weighted children, they can generate more force, so the fractures they experience tend to be more severe and have a higher morbidity. For example, growth plates, which are the cartilaginous region between the epiphysis and metaphysis of adolescent long bones, play an essential role in a child's vertical growth. Unfortunately, growth plates are the softest and weakest sections of a child's skeleton and the last region to harden. Because of this, growth plates are susceptible to fractures which may alter bone growth or stunt a child's growth. Historically, prepubertal children were told not to engage in resistance training, as it was believed that the lack of sufficient hormones would prevent growth and increase the risk of injury. However, it is now known that with the correct technique and intensity, high-impact weight-bearing exercises are essential for children in every stage of their growth, including before puberty, during puberty, and the adolescent stages of life. As mentioned before, obesity presents many challenges for childhood growth, and we can mitigate these through exercise. Beyond the immediate benefits of exercise during childhood has proven lifelong benefits. Take osteoporosis, for example, which is common in older adults and can be prevented with sufficient exercise during childhood. Across the world, technological advancements have allowed the human life expectancy to increase, and as a result, our elderly population is growing. Because exercise during childhood has proven immediate and long-term benefits, we must make sure that children engage in exercise to improve their physical health and prevent health complications for the future generation of elderly within our society.